Do you like books? I mean, really, really like books? Then you're in the right place. Each week, your host, Sam Hankin, interviews the best of today's top-selling authors and the up-and-coming superstars of modern literature. This is The Avid Reader. Here is your host, Sam Hankin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Avid Reader, which is brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop. Our guest today is Agur Schiff, author of Professor Schiff's Guilt. We'll learn more about that later. It's published by New Vessel Press. It's translated by the gifted Jessica Cohen, and it'll be released on May 9th. Agur's debut collection of short stories was Dying Animals in Bad Weather. It was followed by a second collection, Stories for Short Trips. His novels include Bad Habits, What You Wished For, and In the Sand, which actually 6 other novels. So if the first line of your novel, and when I say your, it's also your, it's true. My grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was a slave trader, eponymous Zelig, Schiff, and your epigraph from a real but fictional man who repeats himself in the book later on is when a white European author writes about Africa, he's unwittingly reenacting an exploitive act, which is literary colonialism, which is what he would call it. He has no better description. Well, Professor Schiff may be unwitting or witting, and Professor Schiff may also be either. So it's hard to know as we begin, and for me, even harder when I close the covers. So today, cancel culture, cultural appropriation, Me Too, woke, the 1619 Project, hate crimes, critical race theory, and as of today, it's LGBTQIP2SAA. And as my mother might say, what is this world coming to? Actually, she would say, Oy vez mir, and then she would add, whatever that means. So Henry Ford said, history is bunk. It's also said that history is written by the winners. And even though I'm older, Professor Schiff and I are kind of contemporaries, and we're probably not going to be around to see history. So enter the two Schiffs. Welcome, Professor. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's actually one. It's not my. It's a caricature drawn by Professor Schiff of Professor Schiff. Yes, it's me. Because and not a fictional character with a fictional name, because of the guilt, because I want to carry the burden of the guilt, which is the main theme of the book. The question of what is our guilt as white, people who belong to the white industrial European culture, and what is the guilt of us as belonging to this particular nation called the Jewish nation? In my particular case, is more being an Israeli who actually got use of many years to put the blame on other nations. We are the eternal Jew is the eternal victim. Everybody else is always guilty. Now, if you can you follow me about that? Yes. It's always a game. The Jews always play the game of being the victim and being the guilty, of course, for the ancient crime of the crucifixion, yet being prosecuted over the years. This is the essence of the relationship of the Jews with what's called the Judeo-Christian culture. Now, history, we share the same history. All humanity share the same history, but we don't share the same narratives, not at all. The different narratives and the narratives, the historical narratives give us not only consolation, but also excuses to do things as as communities, as peoples. That's why I draw a straight line from this fictional ancestor, this slave trader, colonial Schiff, and me being an Israeli, and taking the blame for things done by Israel over at least over the last 56 years.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that as you say, a caricature, and it's a very funny book, which is, I always think as a bookseller, humor is a really good way to engage the reader because it propels him or her through the book. And that's one of the reasons why it's such a good book. But also in the Haaretz interview, you kind of implied that you were purposefully taking the guilt upon yourself as a real person, correct?
This is the thing about writing fiction. I wish I could be a political activist, but I'm not. I wish I could be a real academic, not a professor in Bezalel in Art Academy, but a real academic who can make a proper research and a proper academic analysis. But I can't.
Why?
So I use fiction.
Why can't you?
Why? I'm too lazy. And anyway, writing fiction is fun, and I never chose a real academic career. So that's my way to be an activist and to put my view, and maybe I do have a humble ambition to change something in the way in the public thinking. So I use fiction. And that's why I write books. I don't write books just to entertain. I don't write sort of domestic plot stories, the Netflix kind of of dramas. I aim higher. It's my alter ego as a political activist, which I'm not. My wife is, but I'm not. So I write fiction, and that's the whole point. And the book started when about 5 years ago, long before the big explosion of Black Lives Matter, and and knocking down all the sculptures and throwing them into the sea. This talk about reparations started, and I thought to myself, what if being connected somehow to slave trading in a very roundabout way can be considered a crime? And then I decided to put myself in a show trial, echoing the Eichmann trial, with the glass booth and all that. And then this trick with the name came about, because I thought, I'm called Schiff. What is Schiff? Schiff is a ship, right? In Yiddish and German. And how come, my ancestors got this name? They probably did trade in herring tails or whatever. But it was fun inventing this character who got the name Schiff for a real reason, because he had a fleet. He had a fleet, and which was used for as part of the transatlantic slave trade, and that's how the whole book came about.
It's really interesting. When I was researching, I looked up the name Schiff, and it's the earliest documented Jewish name. It was first documented in 1420, and it's the earliest documented Jewish name to be traced back to its actual origin.
Really? I didn't know that.
I was surprised too. Well, so as a bookseller, we're here to sell your book. So I guess we should go back to one. Your research was difficult research, even though you say you're lazy. And then we should talk about Lucille and the beginning of the story and Attorney Melchior. So let's talk about the research, and then let's give us a little bit of the story, because that's what really engages my readers and my listeners.
Sure. You don't want me to tell the story, but
yeah, I do. But also, I want you to tell the story, but I also want you to tell how you went to Ghana and your trip, and the fact that you met a military leader, and the fact that you met this gentleman who was kind of responsible for the epigraph in a way.
Yeah, well, you see, the thing is, you know, the guilt of Professor Schiff, of my caricature, the Professor Schiff of the book, you know, the protagonist, okay? Not the real me, but the fictional me. His guilt starts with the story with Lucille, because the contact between them starts with a very confusing, unpleasant, and, you know, kind of, you know, not very nice way. I don't want to give too much to, you know.
No, you don't have to.
So here is the start of a guilt, but this guilt is still in the boundaries of, you know, of domestic, local, because he is immediately attracted to her, and here is a story about an old gentleman, you know, fancying a young lady who happens to be you know, an immigrant from Africa, okay, and this is kind of this is also, you know, within the cliche of, you know, the dirty old, not only the dirty old man, but attraction, sexual attraction, or as connected to race differences, to cultural differences, you know, and so on and so forth. And he's aware of it, you know, the character is aware of him being a player in a kind of a setup which is not very comfortable for him.
Yeah, but the thing about it is that, and one of the reviews talk about her being a beautiful woman and the idea of love, but it happens so quickly. And I'm not going to try and give away anything, but the connection happens so quickly. I don't really know in my mind whether you've created a beautiful woman, just like your ancestor's young wife. But the connection is intriguing to me because it can't really be love. And we, you know, Lucille has all kinds of qualities that we won't discuss now because that would be like kind of a spoiler. But is that immediate connection a real connection, or is it something?
I think it's fascination. It's you know, it's like, you know, what we discussed before. It's the fascination. It's the, you know, it's the myth of the beautiful savage, you know, that makes her attractive. And this is not nice, you know. Being in this position is, you know, and being aware of being in this position is nasty. It's not, is, you know, and that's the guilt. Oh, this is the beginning of the guilt, because by the end of the book he's riddled with guilt. You know, he's got so many, you know, so many reasons to feel guilt. You know, collective guilt and personal guilt, and, you know, and so on. But this is, you know, this is only the start, you know, the starting point of, you know, of absorbing or experiencing some kind of guilt. And of course, he's got to hide this fascination, this attraction from his wife. And his wife is also attracted to this lady for another reasons, because she is, you know, the self-righteous, you know, political activist with all this the notion of helping refugees and so on.
Your wife is a political activist, and she does in the book. Your wife calls you by your nickname, and someone asked you about that because, okay, does she really call you by your nickname? And also, she's a very shrewd woman, and she reads her husband very well, much better than he reads himself. And this idea of self-absorption, he becomes totally self-absorbed. And it's funny because you refer to Eichmann and the glass booth, and then I thought this interior monologue was almost Joycean. And then the third thing was that his prison, which is like a resort, reminds me of Hitler's quarters after the failed putsch in Landsberg prison, and his birthday party.
Yeah. Yes, and of course he becomes a local celebrity. Everybody wants to befriend him because is the famous test case of the new law and so on and so forth. And then you asked me about going to West Africa, and the thing is, I wanted to read the book. Was it wasn't complete, but basically it was there, the whole book. And but I wanted, first of all, I never been to Africa, and that was ridiculous. That was that was where the epigraph became very poignant, because I wrote about Africa without even being in Africa. So I decided that this is not right by any standard, and I decided to go to Africa. But when I went to Africa, I tried to reenact the invented Professor Schiff, which was this character which was already written in a narrative. And therefore, by the way, I wanted to meet George Weah, the president of Liberia. He is the soccer player. He is the star, the star footballer, which I had as a model. But I couldn't get any reaction from Weah. I really wanted to go interview him. He's an interesting character, but I couldn't reach him. So I went to Ghana. And there in Ghana, I met Jerry Rawlings, who wasn't the late great Ghanaian president, who started as a military dictator and then went on to be a civilian president. All in all, he ruled Ghana for I think 19 years, which is it's quite a long time. And he died 2 years ago, just after, a few months after I interviewed him. Actually, interview is not the right word, because when I met him, he was a larger than life character. I mean, he really was. But he let me ask him only one question, and then he gave me a lecture. There was a flow that went on for about an hour. And then he stood up and he said, it's just, that's it.
Well, the leader in your book, and I won't give too much away, and being a soccer player and also being very charismatic and big, kind of conveys the same type of impression. In your interview, here am I'm an Ashkenazi Jew with 2% Neanderthal, according to 23andMe.
Like all of us.
Yeah, like all of us. But you talk about how, even though you semi-identified yourself as Black when you attempted to write on the wall when you went there, but you said, Professor Schiff, you said, he wouldn't have any problem at Yad Vashem writing his name or speaking his piece. That's you saying that in the interview.
No, I didn't say that. It's actually the journalist who interviewed me.
Oh, the journalist said that.
Yeah, no, okay. Yes, no, I didn't feel any resentment. It was just funny, it's like, I have this synagogue just, next door, and they always ask me to, to join the minyan. And I said to them, I'm not a Jew, just, jokingly. And the rabbi, the first time, now he's familiar with the joke, but the first time he looked at me and he said, "You are a Jew." So how do you know? And he said, I know. So it's the same. It's the same with this African guy who was very nice, and he didn't let me write anything on that wall. And he said, "You're not black." I said, "How do you know?" And he had the same reaction as this rabbi. He looked at me, came a bit closer, and he said, "I know."
Well, it's just a
But
few
it's not the color of my skin, surely. And what is it?
Well, that's the whole thing about what you're lampooning in the book, is that if you identify as Black in today's society, well, there's all kinds of things there. But if you do identify in Black, there's a segment of society that would say, okay, well, certainly I could identify as a dog and pee against a tree. But, it's and I would get away with it perhaps. But yeah, this idea of identification.
You need to have, Sam, you have to have a proof, a solid proof when you want to in our society, and it's getting worse and worse, like it's the oy vey smear of your mother, because now, I mean, what do you want? A DNA test? What do you know? I decide that I'm indigenous, whatever. No, you can't. Give us a proof, a solid, a document. This is a new kind of, forgive me for saying that, but it's a new kind of racism.
Yes, it is. I agree 100%. Well, the question I guess I posited at the outset is with regard to history, and you talk a lot about history and what history actually is and what it isn't. So here are you and I with a relatively, well, me, both of us, a relatively short horizon. If we were a bottle of wine, we'd have 1 5-ounce pour left. Maybe not you, but in any event, because of that, we're not going to be around to see what's shaped. But what is going to be shaped? And that's what you seem to be angry about, if anger is the right word, because it is for me.
Yes, in this stage, I just find it ridiculous. It's not, I'm not, I'm a bit bitter about the whole thing of, of woke and, the politics of the identity politics and so on. And I feel very confused. I get lost, I really don't know. I really don't find myself as a white, white male, straight for that matter. I don't have any. I don't have any real quality. I don't belong anywhere. Even Jews don't count anymore. I mean, once upon a time, saying, "Hey, I'm a Jew," was something. Had some effect. Nowadays, it's it's okay. It's we are degraded to be. We're put with all the other European industrial, belonging to the industrial West, privilege and so on.
Well, not to go through our millennia of suffering, but in America now, I think in each culture, whether it's Germany or whether it's Austria or whether it's Spain or France, once people begin to realize, oh, wait a minute, 80% of the people in Hollywood are Jews. Oh, 70% of stand-up comedians are Jews. Oh, 40% of doctors and dentists and lawyers are Jews. 20% of all Nobel Prizes have been awarded to Jews. Once that realization begins to sink into people, there's a real fear that develops. And I always thought that was the beginning of this realization that, oh, wait a minute, we need to rein this in some fashion. That doesn't sound right, but it's true. It's actually true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I agree. But you see, it's true that my book is not directed to a certain, it's
no.
not answering, and I'm not trying to find solutions. I'm not, it's not, and I'm not, I mean, you probably notice I'm not getting into a definite conclusion. I'm just playing with the dilemmas and putting them up and sort of, using this fiction for a funny discourse. But I'm still confused by the end of the book. I'm still this this confused Professor Schiff.
Well, as you know, being a reader since I was a little kid and being a bookseller, some people like books that are kind of like put in a box, wrapped, tied up, and then the reader can just go away. Whereas your book, which I think are good books, is the reader closes the cover, but then he's not done. There's still work for the reader to do. And I think those are the best kind of books. And as you said, I don't think you're particularly giving us a lesson. And I don't think you're trying to give us a message, actually. And I think, as you said, since you're not an academic and you're not a political activist, you have the luxury of being able to write a book that's just funny and entertaining, but at the same time. And I think, that's what makes the book so not only accessible and readable, but enjoyable.
Great. Lovely of you to say that. It's a great compliment. It's a great compliment.
I don't look at it as a compliment. It's just the way it is. But I guess, and the other way in which it's entertaining and instructive is his trial, which is very Kafkaesque. And you throw these different things in that really give the reader pause, because he's again, not giving too much away, but he's addressing this unseen tribunal, which is the setting of the entire book. And the charge is absurd, whereas in Kafka, you don't even know what the charge is. And I think that's a big portion of the book.
Yes, and it's also, addressing the tribunal is also, actually, these are the serious parts of the book, because these are the occasions in which Professor Schiff is recounting the story of his ancestor, of this colonialism Schiff, and and I put up, there is nothing funny about this slave trader. Because there is nothing funny about slave trading. Slave trading and the circumstances of hijacking, catching people in Africa, the circumstances were horrific, beyond our imagination. So the story of the slave trader, and him becoming, instead of being a master, becoming a spiritual leader. This is absurd. Yes, this is ridiculous, but it's not funny. And then taking these converted Jews, these poor converted Jews to Africa to form a Jewish colony on the shores of West Africa. This is absurd, but it's not funny in any way. So the story of colonialism Schiff, as it is told by his great, I don't know how many, his whatever, but by Professor Schiff, is not a funny story.
Well,
yeah, it's a tragic story, really.
But the line between absurdity and comedy, as I'm talking about with Russian authors, whether it's Gogol or Chekhov, there's a thin line.
True. I'm a great admirer of Gogol. Not so much of Chekhov,
the nose and the overcoat. There are aspects of that in your book, at least to me as a weird reader, but there are aspects of that.
And Gogol tells the most ridiculous stories, dead seriously. It's fantastic, I don't know what's called in English, dead souls. Is this the title in English? Because I know it I'm familiar with the book in Hebrew, and the Hebrew version.
It's Dead Souls.
This is Dead Souls. It takes himself completely. It takes time to because it's so disorientating. You find
Well, yeah.
yourself navigating through a very realistic story, which is completely absurd.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like the nose, you know, he sees his nose getting into a beautiful carriage and his nose has become a
Yeah.
functionary, but nonetheless, you kind of, okay, it
That,
seems
that you know,
reasonable.
and you know, Sam, that it works only with words. Yeah, I saw, because you know, I taught many years in Bezalel, and you know, the setup was animation filmmaking and so on. There were some attempts to, you know, to adopt the nose to the screen, and it never works. It never works. It's, you know, because it's based on your interpretation of, you know, of the you know, of the words of this context, and
Yeah.
that's the magic of Gogol.
And, you know, it's funny because your protagonist, as some of the reviews have said, and I'm not sure I would put it this way, but they say he's totally self-absorbed. And then, but it's not necessarily funny. Just as in the Overcoat, you have this tragic situation, but you have a man who's totally self-absorbed as well. And that's why there is almost the aspect of comedy in that short story.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right. I ask questions that I got to bring it back to selling your book. And I go off just because I'm thinking about it.
Surely you have Gogol on your shelves over there, so you're selling Gogol as well.
Yeah, I have to turn the computer around. He's over there. Yeah, I have all the Russians over there, and then a whole line of Kafka.
Yeah. By the way, another hero of mine is Bulgakov.
I'm not even familiar with him.
Bulgakov?
Oh, Chekhov. Yes. Okay.
No, Chekhov. Bulgakov, the master.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
Margarita.
The Master and Margarita is upstairs on my bedside table because my daughter just gave it to me. But my daughter doesn't like to spend money. So the book was assigned in class. So after she finished it, she gave me the book as if it was a gift that she had actually spent money on, but she hadn't spent a penny.
Okay.
That's Annie. She is just like that. Okay, so if we go back to the homeland and Lucille and the attorney, and you know, it's up to you. I mean, I don't see what's wrong with talking about the plot. I'm not giving any spoilers away, really. But do you think Lucille, and I'll just let you answer if you want to, do you think Lucille actually has the qualities that she appears to possess in this book, which are almost magical?
Listen, as the author who invented Lucille, I'm in love with her.
Me too.
I identify with the you know, with the fictional Professor Schiff completely on this matter. She's yeah, she's clever, and she's courageous. She is manipulative. She's manipulative. The way, you know, there is we didn't mention Morduk. You know, the old gentleman, the 104-year-old gentleman, who actually, you know, he grabs her, and you know, she's his by the end, before she's deported and so on. And as George, the special investigator, comments, when Professor Schiff gives him the book he's writing to read and give his opinion, he says, "Your book is terrible. You have 3 old gentlemen, privileged white gentlemen, dirty old men, falling in love with young exotic African ladies. What a cliche! What a disgusting cliche," he says, and it's true. It's true.
Right. And you're right.
But that's life. Life is, you know, life is a disgusting cliche.
Well, you put yourself in the position of naming your character after yourself. It's your own damn fault. But, you're breaking down the fourth wall, and especially the line, the mantra, the book that I'm writing, that I'm intending to write, that I may in fact be writing now. That certainly, goes back to you.
Yeah, that's taking it maybe one step too, one step further, but maybe one step too many. But writing book should be fun. It's very difficult. It's a difficult job. For me. I know that some writers, just flows out of their fingers, but for me it's hard work. So it might as well be fun. And as long as I make myself laugh, why shouldn't it be written?
I can just see you sitting there and actually laughing out loud.
It happened.
Well, one of the other things you said is that a writer is looking to make his reader love him.
Yeah, I believe that's the prime motivation of any creative person. He wants, he's short of love. Maybe this deeper psychology here. But people like me, and even artists who paint or sculpt or whatever, they want appreciation. They want applause. They want people to say, yes, exciting, whatever. So the prime motivation of writers, even serious writers, those who take themselves very, very extremely seriously, they basically they want the love of the public. That's what they want, and I'm willing to admit it. Some writers, maybe they are not aware of it. I don't know, but they pretend that writing for them is a mission, is a vocation to I don't know what, it's always very bombastic and big, the Amos Oz kind of writers. But I'm willing to admit that it's basically it's love. We want people to love us. We are short of our mother's love. So we want to compensate ourselves. And
well,
and
in America, of course, there are many authors whose production, like Michelangelo's Assistant, is designed solely for money.
Yeah, well, that's another motivation. Yeah, but I never made any serious money from my books. It's very difficult to sell books in Israel anyway. It's a very small. We have a very small audience here in Israel. There are very few Hebrew readers.
Really?
Out of the 9 people who barely speak Hebrew, and live in Israel, maybe 500,000 buy books occasionally. When they go into a bookshop, they usually buy a computer game. They come out with either with a book for a child to give as a present for the holidays, or some kind of game or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
it's nothing like America. It's nothing like America or the English-speaking world.
yeah, and that's why I'm so happy in the bookshop, because people come in and they're actually glad that I'm there. And that's another aspect of, much like you as an author, is I'm happy because I'm making them happy, which I think is a very good goal in life. Just the idea of making people happy every day, or making them laugh, which is what you have done. But it's really interesting because, notwithstanding you not really saying it, but there's a good portion of what's going on in society today. And I used the word anger before only because it's what I feel. but there's a good portion that's going on of things going on in society today that you're extremely dissatisfied with and find
Absolutely.
laughable.
Yeah.
It is laughable. Like in America, in where my daughter is going to school in Richmond, you know, the entire street, all the statues have been knocked down. The pair of stocks in the town center, I think in Connecticut, have been taken away. But as maybe you feel, I feel like if we forget this, just like in Judaism, if you forget those things, then obviously, as the cliche goes, we're doomed to repeat them. And by erasing them, we're doing the worst possible thing we can do.
No, you know, retelling history or retelling the narrative history in such a violent and decisive way is dangerous, and it's not desirable, and it's also childish, and it's silly. And you know, we experienced that in Israel. You know, I don't want really to talk about politics, but you know, I'm really upset about what's going on in Israel as regard to the Palestinians, and you know, and it's to do with a strong sense of retelling history and manipulating the narratives and dogmas and so on and so forth, and it's really upsetting. It's upsetting, and it's also you know, it causes harm. It's you know, it's a source of this bloodshed here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I'm getting into politics here, but
no, well, I mean, I can't help it. I mean, in America, obviously, it's even worse because we have Trump, and the difference between Netanyahu and Trump is that Trump is a nitwit and an idiot and is narcissistic and is only interested. He could be Democrat or Republican. He doesn't really care. Whereas, oh, by the way, I went to high school with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Really?
He was living outside of Philadelphia at the time. His father was a diplomat. And the thing, what my point was, he's articulate, he's personable, and he's intelligent. That's the difference. That's why he has such a leg up in terms of doing things, because he's very effective, where Trump is just Trump, and it's about him. They share qualities, but yeah,
okay, I can agree that. Okay, but we're talking about Netanyahu's and Trump's now, and
all right,
and
yeah,
right, but
you can't.
But I tell you what, but you know, the bottom line is it's really upsetting. What's going on in our world now is really, you know, really upsetting and extremely worrying. And Netanyahu and Trump are just, you know, just part of it.
You know, I'm really more coming from the attitude, and this is getting back to the book, is that it's very difficult to write something that's satirical, because what's happening is such a satire of itself. That's why comedians have a difficult time joking about Trump, because it's almost impossible. I mean, for 7 years, I've been telling my friends, you couldn't make this stuff up. And they're all irritated with me because I just keep saying it.
Yes,
but
yes, you're right. But you know, and things are going. You know, my book is sort of is like a prophecy realizing itself. You know, tomorrow morning they will set a tribunal in some West African country, and you know, and have and you know, somebody as a test case, you know. And where does my satire goes then? I mean, I'm lost.
I know, and the thing is, I'm laughing, but it's because you're right. There's where the humor, that's a different kind of humor, is the fact that what you're saying now could easily happen. And I don't, for once, I'm, you know, speechless. It very seldom happens. Well, yeah. So I guess in conclusion, and we just kind of spoke about it, and you have a different take on it than most authors. And as I said, the book is open-ended. As I closed the covers, as I said in the introduction, I'm still wondering and thinking, okay, what's going to happen next? Which goes back to this real world thing. So what would you like, and you've written a lot and you've been in film. What would you like the reader to take, and it's a kind of cliche-ish question, but what would you like the reader to take away from this work? Because I took away a lot.
Yeah, I want my reader. It's probably it's a wish that will never fulfill itself, but I want the reader to rethink the young readers, surely, to rethink the way they treat history in historical narratives, to bear in mind that fake news might be next year's proper historical narrative, to not to cancel culture, not to even think about canceling culture, because people live by different our ancestors lived in a different world by different standards, and yes, they did horrible things, but we are the result. We are we are the result of it's like sharing the DNA of the Neanderthals. Okay, yes, they were Neanderthals. They're part of us, and these people who did horrible things, they're part of us. They're part of the victims as well as the direct descendants, the perpetrators. We all share the same global village, whether we like it or not. So I want my readers, especially the young readers, to consider it, and not look at with contempt at the previous generations. They had other standards, other ethics, other laws, other way of thinking, and they had syphilis, and they had cataracts, and they had all that as well. Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it is from the bookstore again, because we have book clubs, and I'm going to advocate that this book be in the book club, and I can just see what will happen. There'll be some readers that come in, they'll go, how dare he write this way? And then there'll be another half that says, no, you don't understand. The whole thing is designed to make you rethink. But there will be knee-jerk responses, and those responses will not be moved. They will not be moved. And that's the issue we're talking about.
Yes, because the high priest of the political correctness nowadays in America they hold very, very strong position in public opinion. And I'm sorry for that too, because this is dogma. This is being dogmatic. Okay, you're entitled to have your opinions, but you're not entitled to enforce your opinions on such a big chunk of American culture, and for that matter of Western culture as well. And this is upsetting. It's upsetting. I don't mind people objecting my views or my queries or my questions or my dilemmas. It's okay. You don't have to read the book. You don't have to, and if you read the book, you don't have to like it. That's okay. But don't just put it away and say it's not, it's forbidden. And they are going this path, the high priest of the politically correctness, the path of banning books, banning big and important culture, part of our cultures, Gone with the Wind, Herman Melville's Moby Dick, whatever. And it's ridiculous. It's not only ridiculous, it's sad. It's heartbreaking.
I have two banners outside my bookstore that say read more banned books. And the front windows of my bookstore don't have the new books. They just have banned books. But here I've gotten you, look, you didn't want to, but I've gotten you off on all kinds of political tangents now. So I feel satisfied. But in any event, Agur, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's been a pleasure, and hope we will meet someday in person. Maybe I'll when the book is out, I'll surely come to America and
come to America,
promote.
and then come to the bookshop, and we can have dinner and a couple of drinks, and then we'll really see. We won't have people listening to us, so we can say whatever the hell we want.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.